Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm Trevor Scott here with my co-host Matt,
What's going on, guys?
and we're extremely excited to keep our 32 team evaluations going, and we're going to move over to the AFC North this week. So we're going to start here with the Baltimore Ravens. Matt, let's take it away.
Baltimore Ravens, 13-4 last year, number one seed in the AFC. Unfortunately, ended up losing to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game.
Zay
Kind of a
Flowers.
tough game. Yeah, it was kind of a weird game. Lamar made that insane play early. Zay Flowers had that huge fumble at the goal line. I mean, that
On the
was
one,
really a
man.
game changer.
Changed the game.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, they would have got down to a 3-point deficit. They ended up getting the ball back, and they had another chance, and then Lamar throws a pick in the end zone. The narrative of that game, a lot of it was, the run had sort of been your bread and butter all year. Why'd you get away from the run? And obviously it's easy to pick at things when you lose the game, but like we said, if the fumble didn't happen, and who knows, but bottom line is, the Chiefs proved that they can get on the road, and Baltimore is going to have to unfortunately hear kind of that narrative of Lamar not being able to get him to the promised land all year. But I think as far as the team goes, once again, they're in a good spot. They've got a great roster. They've obviously got a great coach. They've obviously proven that they're a winning franchise over the years. And really, to me, the biggest move of the offseason was bringing in Derrick Henry. Like, that's just, I know that we talked about him, a decent amount. If you guys haven't seen our mock draft video from yesterday, go ahead and check that out, because we do dive into Henry's upside. Going from kind of a crappy team with a crappy O line to a power run team with a much better offensive line, both from a real life and a fantasy perspective. I think that's a huge signing. They extended Bateman, which I think is fine. He never really panned out to be the guy that they hoped he would be when they took a first round selection with him. But obviously at that position, depth is key. And looking at the draft, I think they had a pretty good draft. A lot of people thought that they would go tackle in the first round, but I think 7 or 8 tackles had already gone off the board. So then they went with Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson, absolute burner. Again, I think that was a really good pick. Looking down to the skill position, they took Tez Walker in the fourth round, wide receiver. Really fast guy. It kind of remains to be seen. I mean, obviously the class was deep, but I don't think anyone has crazy expectations with him. But anytime you can get someone to stretch the field and give Lamar some time to make a big play, I think that was also a good division or addition. Sorry. But yeah, overall, I mean, tough pill to swallow the way the season ended, but once again, in a very good spot for this upcoming season.
Totally agree with everything. I think they're in a very unique spot, not having a big time receiver for how good of an offense they are, right? This team is built ground and pound. Getting Derrick Henry, I feel like there have been calls or rumors about him being traded to Baltimore forever.
Yeah.
And him finally landing here now, obviously he's a little older, but I expect him to be just as good, if not better, than he has been. I mean, the upside for touchdowns here is just astronomical in terms of being behind a good line, still having explosion, and being able to be around the goal line all the time on this offense. I
Mhm.
think is really going to help him. The age is going to knock him back down. So it would, like in the mock you mentioned, and again, we're drafting 2 quarterbacks, so that pushes everybody down a little bit. But he was an early fourth round pick. In regular leagues, he's probably an early third round pick. But again, it's another great reason to go receivers before you get running backs. Like if you miss on Christian McCaffrey, there's a very good case to just go receiver, and then Henry if you can get him late, or in the late second round you go Henry and pick whatever receiver is there, and you have a stud at running back pending health. But he should be set to take off here, and he's currently on Fantasy Pros ADP going at number 9, and I think that's going to rise a lot. He's going to be the workhorse back. He's going to get all the work. This offense doesn't really throw to the running backs a lot anyways. So he fits in terms of that as well. It's not like there's going to be somebody else on the field that's going to be taking any sort of meaningful touches away from him in the offense, kind of like we saw with Tajay Spears last year, right? Like Henry sometimes had less than 50% snap share last year because they would get down and Spears would be on the field.
Right.
I just don't see that happening in this offense. Maybe Keaton Mitchell ends up with more receptions, right? And plays some on third down, takes on some of the pass blocking responsibilities. But in terms of touches and in terms of being on the field, I expect to see Henry's snap shares way above where they were last year. And I'm very excited to draft him. He's a very,
Yeah,
very heavy target for me in that third, fourth round area.
yeah, and I mean, even last year, we're talking about all these negative things, his situation, and he still finished number 8 on the
Yep.
season in half PPR. So
And he had some
he was,
stinkers in there, man. He had some really bad games. So to
yeah,
still even overcome that, it's just you look up and it's like, dude, they weren't supposed to be competitive this week. And there he is with 120 and 2. How did that even happen? And so he's got that kind of weekly upside. And on this offense, I don't know that there's going to be very many stinkers, really.
yeah, yeah. I'm very in on him as well. And then moving over to the wide receiver position, the only person that's probably going to be drafted is Zay Flowers, and he was someone
Definitely.
that I traded for last year. I liked him as a player. He ended up finishing number 29. I think Fantasy Pros has him right around that same range.
You
So I'm
traded for him. You should say who you traded him for, because you gave up before he really broke out, and obviously he ended up getting hurt. But Tank Dell is who you gave up to get him. So you
I
like Zay
did.
Flowers.
I do like Zay Flowers, and of course that was before the Tank Dell explosion, and I had Lamar, so I kind of wanted to lean into stacks last year for the first time. But I like where he's at. I think he'll be on a few of my teams. I think a lot of the narrative with him is, when Andrews is healthy, is he the same player? And if you look closely at the statistics, it's actually not as big as a difference as you might think. It's like 10 yards per game, less than 1 catch per game. So if that's something that's kind of scaring you away, then just I would say dig into that a little bit more. But I understand, Flowers making you nervous, just being a smaller bodied guy on a team that wants to run the ball, that has an elite tight end and has a running quarterback. But I'm comfortable with where he's at, and I'll probably have him on a few of my teams, but I wouldn't say he's someone that I'm like laser focused on this year.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I know that's boring for the purposes of content, but
You
at,
never
at
agree with
pick,
anything. So
yeah, I know, right? But I mean, at pick 27 among receivers, right? I mean, there's a lot of names at that spot, but like Zay Flowers has as much upside as anybody at that spot. And like you mentioned about Andrews, Isaiah Likely kind of stepped in and played the Andrews role. It's not exactly like the tight end spot went away last year. I think
right.
he averaged like a tenth of a target less per game without Andrews. So like the workload is not different at all. So like I think you can kind of take the body of work from last year, first season, rookie season, very good player, very productive player. And moving forward, I think it's somebody too that can win at multiple levels of the field. So I think that helps him in terms of his target share too and his projectability, right? Is that um, he doesn't just win short, he doesn't just win deep. So I think they're going to be manufacturing touches for him as their number one. They'll manufacture some screens, some slants, short area targets to get him the ball, and then also take some deep shots with him as well. So I like him a lot. I think without Odell Beckham on the team now, that um, there's potential anyways for even more of those deep balls to get targeted to him.
Mhm.
And they still have Bateman, and they, like you said, they signed or they drafted a burner in Walker, but I don't know how much of a role those guys are really going to even have. It's just
Right.
those are probably likely waiver wire guys. So I think Flowers at this area of the draft is a very good pick, and it's one of those things too where as your third receiver, you can get a team's number one wide receiver that kind of makes him a little bit more appealing in three wide receiver leagues.
Yeah, and just touching on Bateman, if someone's listening to this that's kind of thinking about their draft strategy, when you see a guy like Bateman, it's easy to kind of grab him in the late rounds, but he's just somebody to me that's going to be again on waivers after week 2. So if you find yourself targeting someone like that, that might be a better time to take a flyer on another quarterback or a rookie, or someone that just doesn't feel like is going to be someone that you're going to drop 2 weeks later. And maybe that's because I did that last year and I dropped him. So it hits close to home. But like, if there's someone like whoever, someone making noise or someone that's usually injured and maybe they have a lot of upside, I would encourage you to go in that direction. But this is just kind of hit close to home with that one.
Yeah, and Bateman, he carried the first round caliber receiver. He carried, the upside tag for a long time. So I think it's made
Mhm.
sense why people have gone after Bateman. I think now with Flowers going into his second year, definitely the established one there, because Baltimore kind of was wishy-washy in terms of who the number one receiver even was. So there was a lot of hope for Bateman to be able to take over that role. I think it's definitive going into this year now, differently than it has been over the last couple, that he's not going to be the number one.
Yeah, cool. And then moving over to obviously tight end, and we'll get to quarterback too. But what are your hopes for Andrews this year? They've got him at number 4 fantasy pros right now. Obviously, he was hurt a lot of last year. How are you viewing him? I know we talked about the tight ends more in the upper tier, the top 3 in the previous episode, but what are your thoughts on him?
I still like Andrews a lot. Still young. He's still in a very good position, the
Hmm.
focal point of the passing offense. And I think, honestly, having more options at tight end is why these guys are getting pushed down in drafts this year.
Yeah.
Like Kelsey kind of coming back to the pack a little bit last year with rumors of him taking on less workload this year. And then you got Laporta that moved up there. You got McBride that moved up there, right? And then Andrews is in that same group. So with 4 options that are kind of in the same tier now, it seems like I feel like I'm going to end up with a lot of Andrews because I see him
Mhm.
as part of that first tier. And if I can get him in round 6, that feels like something that I'm going to do all the time. And or in
Mhm.
super flex round 6, right? So, or even into round 7, possibly. I think our 4th tight end last year went in round 7. So I don't know. It's interesting because if somebody takes him earlier than that, right, I'm not going to feel like I need to reach a tight end, right? I'll sit back and I'll wait. I
Mhm.
generally like to go tight end as late as possible while still getting somebody who can be an every week player. So that's generally just my tight end strategy, my approach there. But I really do like Andrews, and the fact that he's at the last player of a tier of that top end tier makes me think that I will end up with him quite a bit.
Cool. Makes a lot of sense. And then Lamar, he in our league last year, I took him as the 4th quarterback off the board. He finished at QB4. But to me, the frustrating thing about being a Lamar manager, and Tua as well, is it just felt like there were so many games where they were either blowing him out or scoring touchdowns on the ground, where it kind of felt like he was worse than 4 in some ways. Obviously, he kind of lit it up, ran a little bit more in the playoffs, but I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be as in on him this year. I think for me, I'll probably be, if I'm going to be at the upper echelon still, I'm going to be looking more like an Anthony Richardson, just because, I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of feel a little out on him. I don't know why.
Well, I get it because those games where Henry's going to score twice really
Yeah.
caps the upside, right? I mean, I know what you're saying, right? And obviously, complaining about the number 4 quarterback is, especially when you drafted him 4th, is a little, it's a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
selfish. But
Yeah.
but I will say, the boom bust nature of Lamar because of the offense he operates in, right, is like, especially in those games where they're going to be playing teams that they're going to beat up badly because they have a good defense, right? Good teams that just can't score on them. If
Yeah.
Lamar's not part of that scoring to get them ahead, he's not going to score the points, right? So you end up with, the first half, it's like they're winning 24-7, but you look up and Lamar has 50 and a touchdown, and it's like, dude, that's like 6 points. He might not do anything else the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And then there's times where it's that exact same setup, except for he has 50 in a rushing touchdown on top of 100 with a passing touchdown. It's like, oh, well, he's already got 17. He could easily go for 25, which he generally would. So, I get a little bit of the boom bust nature that's built in because of the team that he's on and because of how good they are. But I really like Lamar going into this year. I was kind of out on him going into last year. I don't know why. I guess I just didn't love the setup around having like Gus be the lead back. He was fine, but I just guess I felt like the offense wasn't going to operate as smoothly without a dedicated running back. And I feel like they have that now, so I feel like their offense is going to be even better than last year. And I'm more in on Lamar. I actually have him ranked at third among quarterbacks behind Allen and Hurts, and then Lamar, then Mahomes, then Stroud. So, and that's all very much subject to change because I have them in a tier, and having Stroud fifth just doesn't seem right with the weapons around him. And we'll get into him during the Houston preview. But currently, I have Lamar up at 3. I expect in most, if not all, 2 QB leagues, he's going to be a first round pick. I would expect in our league that he's going to be a first or early second round pick. And it's just game breaking. It's one of those things like Tyreek Hill. When he goes off, and then it's like, got to overcome 35 points or 40 points from Lamar. And there's just not very many players that have that level of upside. So I really, really like Lamar.
Yeah, when you're matched up against a guy that has him, you're going into that week sweating, and you're probably
Yeah,
going to be a little bit riskier with the flex and shoot for some upside. So I get that, and I obviously love him as a player, and he won the MVP, and so that'll be interesting to kind of see how your quarterback rankings shake out as we get closer to the draft.
yeah, agreed. And like I said, the name that I'm hesitating on a lot is Stroud. I just want to move him like to second. I just think he's so good. And it's like going to be a second year breakout. Adding Diggs can only help. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just feel like I want to keep moving him up, but I haven't yet. So,
Well, I
but
mean,
in the
it's one of
meantime,
those
I would
things
be
too
very
where,
happy with Lamar in the middle to end of the second round. And during the next mock draft, we'll see if we can make something happen with him in the first round. That's kind of what I'm going
and
to be
that's the
looking at.
importance of curating your own ratings too. Like anybody that's watching this, like you're going to have to plant your flag with certain guys. If you want to, you're not playing to get fifth place. Like if that's how you feel, and you're not going to get him at a certain point, like you got to just go with your research and your gut there.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. Any lasting thoughts on Baltimore?
Nope. I think it's pretty straightforward. Just to summarize, you've got Henry at running back, you got Flowers at receiver, you've got Andrews at tight end, you got Lamar at quarterback. Those 4 are going to be the 4 guys picked off of this team. And like you said about Bateman or anybody else on this team, I would refrain from drafting anybody else unless you're gonna cuff Henry with Keaton Mitchell. That's the only other exception, I guess. Um, but yeah, I really like this team. I really like how concentrated the offense is. I like that they're reliable, and I think that there's a lot of fantasy value to be had here on this team. So I like the Ravens. And
Agreed.
with that, our first team of the AFC North is complete, and we'll see you here tomorrow to go over the Bengals.